Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything, drawing every country in the world's flag. And today we're doing the good old red, white, and blue of, not here, but here, Cuba. Thought I was going somewhere else with that. Cuba, south of Florida, and probably heard about Cuba. Definitely one of the more important countries of the 20th century, one of the only surviving communist countries in the world. I actually do kind of like their flag, though. I think their flag is actually kind of neat. It is a longer flag, so just bear with me here as I'm getting those guidelines ready. So Cuba, James. Cuba is an island. It's actually a lot of islands. The nation of Cuba, there's about 4,000 islands there. So, yeah, more than just some of the other recent island countries we've been doing. I believe it is the biggest country, not population-wise, but as far as square footage-wise, in the Caribbean. So, native Taino people in ancient times, Christopher Columbus arrives, African slaves, and island was rich, lots of sugar. That was a big thing back then. And just put that star in the middle here. We want to talk about modern Cuba, though, right? Modern Cuba, that's where it gets, that's where the fun begins. So modern Cuba, you do have a lot of Cuban nationalist, independence movements in the mid 19th century, and that's actually kind of why their flag looks like the Texas flag, and it actually does have the La Estrella Solitaria, the Lone Star, in the flag. They actually did take it from the Texas flag. There were a lot of movements in that part of the world looking for independence from the Spanish Empire. And I've talked about this before. Spanish Empire, pretty much on its last legs at the dawn of the 20th century. Spanish-American War. United States helps kick Spain out of Cuba in 1898, and that's a really interesting war to study from the United States side. It's really kind of the first ideological war. You usually think wars are fought for national interests or defense, but this was the first one that, we're fighting for quote-unquote Cuban independence, and then somehow that leads to going to the Philippines and trying to Christianize the people that had already been Christian for like 500 years, seeing as how the Spanish were there. But yeah, a lot of lies to get the Americans into that war. Remember the Maine, total myth. It was not attacked by the Spanish. It did have a malfunction where some I forget, what was it, dynamite, something like that, blew up on the ship, and it was sold as the Spanish attacking. So lying to get America into war is nothing new. It's been going on for over 100 years, and I can get into other examples, but this ain't the time for that. So the United States installs military rule in Cuba for a couple years, kind of like an interim government. And then in 1902, Cuba is declared an independent republic. And not exactly smooth sailing after that. Tons of coups, a lot of American kind of involvement as well. If you remember the Batista regime before Castro, there was a lot of communist cells uprising in Cuba, and Batista, he actually outlawed a lot of communist parties, but then he was overthrown and kicked out of the country by Fidel Castro. And he is like one of the commies of the commies. He was in power for several decades. When did Castro actually take power? I mean, Castro was alive when Kennedy was alive, and they actually had a lot of dealings. And that's actually a very, very kind of odd story. You don't really get the full side of that from like court historians. Court historians meaning kind of like just your mainstream. I call them the Barnes and Noble historians. But yeah, the United States looking to actually peacefully, you know, kind of go their separate ways with Cuba. But there were an awful lot of people in the State Department that probably would have used nukes on Cuba. This is before the missile crisis. This is just due to the fact that they were communists. And Kennedy, kind of against that, may or may not have led to him getting offed, getting that little haircut he got in Dallas. But yeah, and Castro, actually there's a lot of first-hand sources too that show Castro was looking for peace as well. And yeah, but the United States remained antagonistic with Cuba throughout most of its existence. Only fairly recently kind of opened up renegotiations with them, but there is still a blockade. And yeah, when did Castro actually take power? Yeah, it was 1959. So Cuban Missile Crisis happens under that, under his watch as well. Bay of Pigs invasion, which actually Eisenhower set up. He kind of put the wheels in motion for that before Kennedy was in office. Kennedy kind of takes the blame for that one. I'm not even really a Kennedy fan, but I think that's kind of unfair. And yeah, it's the military-industrial complex. You did have communism right at America's doorstep. You know, Cuba is not far from Florida at all. And yeah, communism is so awesome that Cubans will make a boat out of basically 2 wooden boards and a spare tire, just and risk life and limb, you know, getting to Florida to get away from it. But yeah, keep trying it. Keep trying it, lefties, over and over and over and over again. But oh, they're not doing it the right way. Well, what is the right way? No. And again, yeah, Cuba is still communist to this day. You always hear about Cuban cigars and everything. Funny story about that. I actually think those are a little bit overrated. Just due to the fact that, yeah, when, I mean, at one point, I couldn't say because this was a very long time ago, but at one point, you know, a lot of great tobacco from that part of the world. But, you know, of course, communists, they don't like to work, but they certainly like to tell people what to do. So they nationalized the cigar industries in Cuba. And of course, when you put all these liberal arts majors in control of things, all of a sudden you don't have what you're trying to produce anymore. And yeah, the cigars, I'm sure there are, you know, some that are very good. I know Cuba still does make good cigars, but yeah, it's not like you hear people say that like, oh, just because it's Cuban, like it's got to be amazing. A lot of good stuff actually made right here in the US of A, because capitalism giving incentives for production actually works. You know, like places like Connecticut and hydroponics and all that stuff, you can basically grow almost anything anywhere today with the right technology. So there is Cuba, and I'm going to give you a little bonus content since we're talking about cigars. Let's see here. I'm going to draw one of my favorites. And yeah, I actually saw when I was doing a little bit of research today, Cuba they just cut their bread rations. Still, in 2024, we're still doing this stuff. So everybody gets their daily bread rations, like good little commies. And now they don't. They're barely surviving on what they eat. So yeah, no bread. Okay, so this is not a Cuban cigar. This is an American cigar. It's called the Diesel Wicked. And I gotta say, it is one of my favorites right now. So there's the label. Let me just write Wicked in there. It's kind of wrapping around. And let's see what we can do to give that a little bit of shadow. Okay. And I'm just gonna kind of make those letters pop a little bit. And I don't know, maybe if maybe I'll do a cigar stream if I get to 100 subscribers. James, you mean you're gonna draw and have a cigar? Actually, no, I was thinking about just having a cigar and answering questions. That'd be kind of boring though, right? Or what if I just didn't even answer questions? It'd just be smoking a cigar for an hour. So we'll do a light brown first. Okay. And then just kind of with our contours with the dark. Yeah, I will, though, if I do get to 100 subscribers. Well, I'll treat myself to something. Just don't know what yet. Okay, so we're just kind of building up. There's a tapered point over there. And then again, just sort of go with the direction of the object. Yeah, and then I guess a little more on Cuba as I'm doing this. So Cuba, you know, being one of the quote-unquote more successful, you know, not by any kind of metrics or anything like that, but by actually like taking foot there, one of the successful communist countries in the Western Hemisphere, very tightly aligned with the Soviet Union. Again, you know, the Khrushchev, not Stalin. If Stalin was in power during that missile crisis, we might not be here today. We might actually be in a very, very different place. But yeah, Khrushchev was a little bit easier to deal with than Stalin would have been. So yeah, Cuba always kind of supported leftist uprisings in that area, namely El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, so various communist uprisings in the Latin American world. Usually Cuba's in there somewhere. So I'm just going to draw my leaf wrapper here. Okay, and then just a little bit of gray shadow. And just drag it out. Alright, so there's Cuba. There's a drawing of a cigar. Hey, there's the real cigar. And maybe I'll smoke that if I get to 100 subscribers. We'll see. I don't know. We'll do something. But you know what you got to do. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you on the next video.